The motion sensor light on my shed flicked on at 2 in the morning, and through the howling wind of the worst blizzard Vermont had seen in 15 years, I saw 3 figures breaking into my property. I was already awake, feeding logs into the fireplace of my mountain home in Stowe, listening to the wind shriek like a living thing. The power had gone out an hour ago, and the temperature was dropping fast. My phone buzzed with emergency alerts about the storm, telling people to stay inside, that rescue operations were suspended until conditions improved. I had been a federal judge for 12 years, and I had learned to trust my instincts. When that light came on, every nerve in my body went on alert. I moved to the window, careful not to be seen, and watched as 3 people wearing heavy coats struggled against the wind toward my woodshed. The shed was a sturdy structure I had built myself 5 years ago, with a proper lock and enough seasoned firewood to last me through 2 winters. I had spent countless weekends splitting and stacking that wood, finding peace in the physical labor after long days on the bench. The figures were having trouble with the lock, but then I saw one of them produce bolt cutters. The metal snapped, barely audible over the storm, and they pulled the door open. The motion light gave me a clear view as they started loading my firewood into what looked like a small utility trailer attached to a snowmobile. I grabbed my phone and started recording video, making sure to capture everything through the window. Years of reviewing evidence had taught me the importance of documentation. The video quality was not great in the dark and snow, but the motion light provided just enough illumination to see what was happening. One of the figures turned toward the house, and I got a clear look at her face. Brenda Patterson, the president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. I recognized her immediately, even bundled up in her expensive ski jacket. The other 2 were harder to identify, but I thought I recognized Dale Murphy, the HOA treasurer, and possibly Linda Chen, a board member. My jaw clenched. Brenda had been a thorn in my side since I moved into this neighborhood 3 years ago. The HOA had strict rules about everything from mailbox colors to the height of grass, but I had always followed them to the letter. I was not about to give them ammunition. Still, Brenda seemed to take personal offense to my existence. Maybe it was because I had refused to join the board, or because I had declined to attend her endless social functions. I valued my privacy, especially given my position as a judge. I watched them load log after log into their trailer, working quickly despite the wind. They were taking a substantial amount, probably half my supply. The audacity of it stunned me. This was not some minor HOA overreach like demanding I repaint my shutters or move my trash cans. This was theft, plain and simple, breaking and entering during an emergency. I continued recording until they finished and drove away on the snowmobile, struggling through the deepening snow. Then I checked the timestamp on my video and made several additional notes on my phone. The judge in me was already building a case. The next morning, the blizzard had not let up. If anything, it had gotten worse. The snow was piled 4 feet high against my house, and the wind was still gusting hard enough to shake the windows. I had plenty of firewood left inside, enough to keep warm for another day or 2, but that was not the point. What Brenda and her cronies had done was criminal. Around 10 in the morning, my satellite phone rang. Regular cell service had been out since the previous evening, but I kept a satellite phone for emergencies. It was my clerk, Jennifer, calling from the federal courthouse in Burlington. "Judge Harrison, just checking that you are safe," she said. "The whole state is shut down." "I am fine, Jennifer. Got plenty of supplies." I did not mention the theft. Not yet. Court is canceled for the rest of the week. The U.S. Attorney's office is closed too. They are saying this storm might last another 2 days. Keep me posted if anything changes." After I hung up, I sat by the fire and thought about my next move. I could call the local police, but they were overwhelmed with the emergency. People were stranded on highways, homes were losing power, and there were reports of carbon monoxide poisoning from people using generators incorrectly. My stolen firewood would be low priority, and I did not want to pull resources away from life-threatening situations. But I was not going to let this slide either. Around noon, someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Brenda Patterson standing there, snow covering her jacket, her face red from the cold. The absolute nerve of this woman. I opened the door just wide enough to see her. "Yes." "Oh, Adam, thank goodness you answered." She tried to look concerned, but I could see right through it. "I am going around checking on everyone in the neighborhood. This storm is terrible. Do you have everything you need? Enough firewood to stay warm?" The question was so brazen I almost laughed. I had plenty until someone stole half my supply last night. Her expression did not change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. "Stole your firewood? That is terrible. Did you see who did it?" "I have video footage, very clear video." Now I saw real concern cross her face. "Video? Well, I am sure it was just someone desperate because of the storm. People do strange things in emergencies. Breaking into someone's property and stealing with bolt cutters is not strange, Brenda. It is criminal. Breaking and entering, theft, destruction of property." She straightened up and her fake concern evaporated. "Now, let us not be hasty, Adam. If someone did take some firewood, I am sure they were in genuine need. This storm is dangerous. People could die without heat. Then they should have knocked on my door and asked like decent human beings. I would have given them wood if they needed it." "Would you have?" She raised an eyebrow. "You are not exactly the neighborly type. You skip every HOA meeting, every community event. You keep to yourself. Some might say you are not really part of this community at all." "I follow every HOA rule," I said evenly. "What I do beyond that is my business. Listen, Adam." Her voice took on a harder edge. "I do not know what you think you saw last night, but making accusations during an emergency is not going to make you any friends. The HOA board has been discussing some concerns about your property anyway. That shed of yours, for instance. The plans you submitted were for a 10 by 12 structure, but it looks bigger than that. We may need to have it measured." There it was, the veiled threat. If I pursued the theft, she would use the HOA to make my life difficult. "The shed is exactly 10 by 12, I said, "and this conversation is over." I closed the door in her face and locked it. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from anger. I was a federal judge, appointed for life, and I was not about to be bullied by a small-time tyrant on a power trip. I spent the rest of the day documenting everything. I took photos of the broken lock on my shed, the tire tracks in the snow that were already being covered by fresh snowfall, and the depleted woodpile. I transferred the video from my phone to my laptop and backed it up in 3 different places. Then I started researching Vermont state law on theft and breaking and entering. The storm continued to rage. By evening, the temperature had dropped to 5 below zero, not counting the wind chill. I was burning through my remaining indoor firewood faster than I would have liked, and I knew I would need to brave the weather tomorrow to bring more in from the shed. Thanks to Brenda and her accomplices, I had far less margin for error. Around 8 that evening, my satellite phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. "Is this Judge Adam Harrison?" a man's voice asked, speaking. "Who is this?" "My name is Tom Whitaker. I live 3 houses down from you in Maple Ridge. I hope you do not mind. I got your number from the neighborhood directory. I wanted to warn you about something." "Go ahead." I was at an emergency HOA meeting this afternoon. Brenda called it because of the storm. She told everyone that you were hoarding firewood and refusing to share with neighbors who needed it. She said she was going to have to implement emergency protocols to redistribute resources. I felt my blood pressure rising. Did she mention that she stole my firewood last night? There was a pause. She said the HOA board had to make some hard decisions about accessing supplies that people were not using. She made it sound official, like it was within her authority. It is not even close. What she did was theft. I believe you, Judge Harrison. That is why I am calling. Brenda has been getting more and more power-hungry over the past year. She pushed through a bunch of new rules, increased the HOA fees, and she has been fining people for ridiculous violations. A lot of us are fed up, but she has her supporters, and they control the board. I just wanted you to know that she is spinning a story about you. I appreciate the heads up, Tom. There is more. She mentioned that she knows you are a federal judge, and she said something about how even judges have to follow community rules. It felt like she was testing how far she could push you. After Tom hung up, I sat staring into the fire. This situation had escalated beyond a simple theft. Brenda was now trying to frame her criminal actions as some kind of legitimate HOA authority, and she was turning the neighborhood against me in the process. I had two choices. I could let it go, write it off as a loss and just avoid future conflict, or I could hold her accountable. Given my position as a federal judge, some might argue I should take the high road, not get involved in petty neighborhood disputes. But this was not petty. Brenda had committed multiple crimes, and now she was lying about it and abusing her position. If I let her get away with it, she would continue to escalate. People like her always did. The next morning, the storm finally started to break. The wind died down, and the snow turned to light flurries. I bundled up and went out to my shed to bring in more firewood. The broken lock hung uselessly, and I could see exactly how much was missing. At current prices, they had stolen probably $800 worth of seasoned firewood, not counting the lock and the violation of my property. I was carrying an armload back to the house when I saw Dale Murphy walking down the street. He was the HOA treasurer, and I was fairly certain he had been one of the people with Brenda 2 nights ago. "Morning, Dale," I called out. He looked startled, then waved nervously. "Oh, hey, Judge Harrison. Glad to see you made it through the storm okay. No thanks to whoever broke into my shed." He paled. "Yeah, I heard about that. Terrible thing. You know how it is during emergencies, though. People get desperate." "You would not happen to know anything about it, would you?" Me? "No, of course not. I was home with my family the whole time." He was a terrible liar. His eyes kept darting away, and he was shifting his weight from foot to foot. "That is interesting, because I have video footage that says otherwise." Now he looked genuinely panicked. "Listen, Judge Harrison, I do not know what you think you saw, but I saw you, Brenda and Linda, breaking into my shed with bolt cutters and stealing my firewood. It is all on video, time-stamped and backed up. That is breaking and entering, theft and destruction of property. In Vermont, breaking and entering is a felony if it is into any building or structure, not just homes." Dale's face went from pale to flushed. "You cannot prove it was us." It was dark, and the storm, the motion light on my shed, provides excellent illumination. I can see Brenda's face clearly. Yours is a bit more obscured, but I am confident a jury would have no trouble identifying you." He stood there opening and closing his mouth like a fish. Finally, he said, "Brenda said you would not do anything. She said you would not want the attention, being a judge and all." Brenda was wrong. I left him standing there and went back to my house. I spent the rest of the day making phone calls. The roads were still impassable, but the emergency services were getting back online. I called the Vermont State Police and filed a report about the theft and breaking and entering. The trooper I spoke with was professional and took down all the details. Given the storm situation, we probably cannot get anyone out there for another day or two, he said. But we will definitely investigate. If you have video evidence, that will be very helpful. I will have copies ready for you. One more thing, Judge Harrison. You said the suspects are members of your HOA board. That is correct. The president, treasurer, and a board member. We have actually been getting some complaints about that HOA, nothing we could act on before, mostly civil matters. But if they are committing crimes under the guise of HOA authority, that is something else entirely. The next day, the sun came out for the first time in 4 days. The plows were finally able to clear the main roads, though the neighborhoods would take longer. My driveway was buried under 5 feet of snow in places. I spent several hours with my snowblower clearing a path. Around noon, a Vermont State Police cruiser made its way down the street, moving slowly through the snow. Trooper Elizabeth Morrison knocked on my door 20 minutes later. Judge Harrison, I am here about your report. I invited her in and showed her everything. The video footage, the photos of the damage, the broken lock. She watched the video 3 times, taking notes. That is definitely Brenda Patterson, she said. I have had dealings with her before. The other 2 are a bit harder to see, but with the context and other evidence, we should be able to make a case. Have any of them said anything to you about this? I told her about my conversations with Brenda and Dale, including their implied admissions. Trooper Morrison nodded. That helps. I am going to go talk to them now. Given the severity of the storm and the fact that we are dealing with multiple suspects who might coordinate their stories, I am going to ask them to come down to the station for formal interviews as soon as the roads are clear enough. What are the potential charges? Breaking and entering, grand larceny if the value is over $900, criminal mischief for the lock, and possibly conspiracy if we can prove they planned this together. The breaking and entering alone is a felony in Vermont. After Trooper Morrison left, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was now in the hands of law enforcement where it belonged. I was not pursuing some personal vendetta. I was simply reporting crimes that had been committed against me, but I knew Brenda would not go quietly. That evening, I received an email from the Maple Ridge HOA board. It was a formal notice of violation, signed by Brenda Patterson. Dear Mr. Harrison, it has come to the attention of the HOA board that your shed structure exceeds the dimensions approved in your original application. Per HOA Bylaws Section 7.3, all structures must conform to approved plans. You are hereby notified that you have 30 days to bring the structure into compliance or face fines of $100 per day. Additionally, your property was inspected during the recent storm emergency, and it was determined that you were in violation of Section 12.1 regarding community resource sharing during disasters. The board exercised its emergency powers to redistribute essential supplies to neighbors in need. You are required to attend a hearing to discuss this matter. Finally, there are concerns about your general lack of community participation. The board is considering whether your attitude is compatible with the community standards outlined in the HOA covenant. Please respond to this notice within 10 business days. Brenda Patterson, HOA President. I read it twice, marveling at the sheer audacity. She had just confessed in writing to taking my firewood, trying to dress it up as legitimate HOA authority. The bit about my shed was pure retaliation, and the threat about community standards was laughably vague. I forwarded the email to Trooper Morrison with a note. More evidence for you. Then I did something I rarely did. I called my old friend Marcus Webb, who was a civil litigation attorney in Burlington. We had gone to law school together at Georgetown, and he had a reputation as a fighter who did not back down. "Adam, good to hear from you," Marcus said. "I heard about the blizzard up there. You doing okay?" "I need some legal advice. Personal matter." I explained the situation, and Marcus listened without interrupting. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "So your HOA president committed multiple felonies and is now trying to cover it up with bogus violations." That is an accurate summary. First, that email is gold. She basically admitted to taking your property. Second, that shed measurement threat is clearly retaliatory. Third, there is no such thing as HOA emergency powers to seize property. That is not a thing. She made it up. That is what I thought, but I wanted confirmation. Here is what you should do. Let the criminal case play out with the police. But also, you need to go on offense with the HOA. If you do not push back hard, she is going to bury you in fake violations and try to make your life miserable. File a lawsuit against the HOA and Brenda personally for harassment, conversion of property, and abuse of authority. I will handle it for you. I do not want special treatment because I am a judge. You are not getting special treatment. You are getting what anyone should get when their property rights are violated. The fact that you happen to be a federal judge just means you understand the system well enough not to be intimidated. Let me think about it. Do not think too long. People like Brenda count on others being too tired or too scared to fight back. That is how they get away with it. Over the next few days, things moved quickly. Trooper Morrison interviewed Brenda, Dale, and Linda. According to what she told me later, all three initially denied being at my property, but when confronted with the video evidence, their stories fell apart. Dale cracked first. He admitted to being there and taking the firewood, but he claimed it was all Brenda's idea. He said she had convinced him and Linda that it was a legitimate use of HOA emergency authority, and that I was a problem resident who was not contributing to the community. Linda's story was similar. She admitted to being there but painted herself as a reluctant participant who had been pressured by Brenda. Brenda, for her part, remained defiant. According to Trooper Morrison, she claimed that the HOA bylaws gave her broad authority during emergencies, and that she had a right to access my property. She also claimed that I had been informed about the emergency resource sharing policy at a previous meeting, which was a complete fabrication since I had never attended a meeting where any such thing was discussed. The day after the interviews, all three were charged. Brenda faced charges of breaking and entering, grand larceny, criminal mischief, and conspiracy. Dale and Linda faced similar charges, but with the prosecution indicating they might be willing to work out plea deals given their cooperation. The local news picked up the story. HOA president charged with stealing firewood during blizzard ran in the Burlington Free Press. The article did not initially mention that I was a federal judge, which I appreciated. I had not wanted this to become about my position. But then Brenda gave an interview to a local TV station, and everything changed. "This is a witch hunt," she told the reporter, standing in front of her large colonial home in Maple Ridge. "Judge Harrison has never been a team player in this community. He thinks he is above the rules because of his position. When we had to make hard decisions during the storm to keep people safe, he decided to use his connections to persecute me." The reporter pressed her. "But you are charged with breaking into his shed and taking his property without permission." I exercised my authority as HOA president to ensure all residents had access to essential supplies during a life-threatening emergency. If Judge Harrison had been willing to share voluntarily, none of this would have been necessary. It was a masterclass in spin, and it made my blood boil. Now the story was no longer about an HOA president committing crimes. It had become about a powerful judge going after a volunteer community leader. The phone calls started that evening. Reporters wanted comments. I declined them all. Other judges called to express support or concern. My brother called from Colorado, having seen the story on national news. It had apparently hit that sweet spot of being both bizarre and relatable. Everyone hated HOAs and everyone had storm stories. "Are you sure you want to push this?" my brother asked. "It feels like it might blow back on you." "She broke into my property and stole from me, then lied about it. What am I supposed to do? Let it go because I am a judge?" I am just saying, the optics are tricky. Rich federal judge versus community volunteer. She is not some volunteer trying to help people. She is a criminal who got caught, my brother sighed. "I know. I am on your side. Just be careful." The next day, I received a petition signed by 43 residents of Maple Ridge asking me to drop the charges against Brenda in the spirit of community healing. The petition argued that the storm had been an extraordinary situation, that Brenda had been acting in what she thought was the community's best interest, and that pursuing criminal charges was divisive and vindictive. I read through the names. Many I did not recognize, but some I did. They were Brenda's friends, her allies on various committees. Notably absent were signatures from people like Tom Whitaker, who had called to warn me. That same day Marcus called. I filed the lawsuit. "You are suing Brenda Patterson individually and the Maple Ridge HOA for conversion, trespass, harassment, and abuse of authority. I am asking for return of the value of the firewood, punitive damages, attorney's fees, and an injunction preventing the HOA from pursuing any retaliatory actions against you." What kind of timeline are we looking at? Civil cases take longer than criminal. But I filed in state court here in Vermont, and I am going to push for expedited treatment given the ongoing harassment. I also sent a letter to the entire HOA board, notifying them that any further violations issued against you will be considered evidence of retaliation. 2 days later, I received another email from the HOA. This one was from Linda Chen, not Brenda. "Dear Mr. Harrison, the HOA board has reviewed your account and determined that the violation notice regarding your shed was issued in error. Upon proper measurement, your shed is in compliance with approved specifications. This matter is closed. Additionally, the board has reviewed the emergency resource policy referenced in the previous notice. After consulting with our attorney, we have determined that this policy was not properly adopted and therefore is not enforceable. We apologize for any confusion. The board hopes we can move forward constructively. Linda Chen, acting HOA president, so Brenda was out, at least temporarily." The HOA was trying to distance itself from her actions, which was smart. If they had continued to back her up, I would have had an even stronger case against the organization itself. But I was not done. The criminal charges were proceeding, and my civil lawsuit was moving forward. Brenda had not just wronged me. She had abused a position of trust, committed serious crimes, and then lied about it repeatedly. The preliminary hearing for the criminal case was set for 3 weeks later. All 3 defendants appeared with attorneys. Brenda had hired a criminal defense lawyer from Montpelier, someone with a reputation for aggressive tactics. Dale and Linda had public defenders, which suggested they were not as financially prepared for this fight. I attended the hearing, sitting in the gallery. It felt strange to be on the other side of the courtroom, not in my usual position on the bench. The judge was Margaret Rowlands, a state district court judge I knew in passing. She was fair and thorough. The prosecution laid out the charges and the evidence. When Brenda's attorney argued that the video was too unclear to identify his client, the prosecutor played it on a large screen. Even in the snow and darkness, Brenda's face was unmistakable. There was an audible reaction in the courtroom. Brenda's attorney then argued that his client had acted in good faith, believing she had authority under the HOA bylaws. Judge Rollins was not impressed. Counsel, belief in HOA authority does not give one the right to break into private property with bolt cutters. That is not a good faith defense. Your Honor, this is a case of overzealous community leadership, not criminal intent. That is for a jury to decide. Probable cause has been clearly established. All three defendants will be bound over for trial. The prosecution then addressed the plea negotiations. They were offering Dale and Linda deals that would reduce the breaking and entering charges to misdemeanors in exchange for their testimony against Brenda. Both accepted on the spot. Brenda's face went red. As we left the courtroom, she spotted me and marched over. "This is all your fault," she hissed. "You could not just let it go. You had to destroy people's lives over some firewood." "You destroyed your own life when you decided to commit crimes," I said evenly. "You had every opportunity to admit what you did and make it right. Instead, you doubled down and lied. I was helping the community. You were helping yourself. You have been on a power trip since you became HOA president, and you finally went too far." Her attorney pulled her away before she could respond, which was probably wise. Anything else she said to me could be used against her. The civil lawsuit was moving faster than I expected. Marcus filed a motion for summary judgment, arguing that the facts were not in dispute and that we should win as a matter of law. The HOA's attorney filed a response that basically threw Brenda under the bus, arguing that she had acted outside her authority and that the HOA itself should not be held liable for her personal misconduct. "They are trying to escape liability," Marcus explained. "But I am arguing that the HOA is responsible for the actions of its officers and that they failed to properly oversee her. Plus, they sent you that first violation notice backing up her actions, which shows organizational culpability. In discovery, we got access to the HOA's internal documents. What we found was damning. Brenda had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, including charging dinners and shopping trips to the HOA credit card. She had issued violations to neighbors who had opposed her on the board, using minor technicalities as pretexts. She had even tried to fine one family for having the wrong color flowers in their garden, a rule that did not exist anywhere in the bylaws. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that the firewood theft was not an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern of abuse of authority. Tom Whitaker, the neighbor who had called to warn me, reached out again. "A bunch of us are organizing to recall the entire HOA board and rewrite the bylaws. We have been dealing with Brenda's nonsense for too long. What happened to you was the last straw. Would you be willing to support the effort?" "Absolutely. What do you need? Just your signature on the petition and maybe your presence at a meeting. People respect you." I attended the meeting the following week. It was held in the community center and over 60 residents showed up. The anger in the room was palpable. Person after person stood up to share stories of how Brenda and the board had harassed them, issued bogus fines, and made their lives difficult. One elderly couple talked about being fined $500 because their grass was a quarter-inch too tall, according to Brenda's measurement. A single mother described being threatened with a lien on her property because she had not painted her front door quickly enough after Brenda demanded it. A veteran talked about being told his American flag was not in compliance with HOA rules, which turned out to be false. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it brief. What happened to me was theft and breaking and entering. What has happened to many of you is harassment and abuse of authority. None of it is acceptable. I support your efforts to reform this HOA and hold people accountable. The room erupted in applause. Within 2 weeks, the recall petition had enough signatures. The entire board was removed and an interim board was elected. Tom Whitaker became the new president. One of his first acts was to settle the civil lawsuit with me. The HOA agreed to pay me $20,000 in damages and attorney's fees, issue a formal apology, and implement new oversight procedures to prevent future abuse. More importantly, the settlement included a provision that the HOA would cooperate fully with the criminal prosecution of Brenda Patterson. The criminal trial took place 4 months after the blizzard. It lasted 3 days. Dale and Linda both testified against Brenda, describing how she had planned the theft, insisting it was within her authority, and that I was a problem resident who deserved it. The prosecution also called several other residents who testified about Brenda's pattern of abuse and power-hungry behavior, establishing motive and intent. I was called as a witness. It was surreal to sit in the witness box and be questioned. The prosecutor was efficient, having me identify the video, confirm the timeline, and describe the damage. Brenda's attorney tried to shake me on cross-examination. Judge Harrison, is it not true that you have a reputation for being unfriendly and uncooperative in your neighborhood? I keep to myself, but I follow all the rules. You never attended HOA meetings, did you? I was not required to attend, but you benefited from the HOA's work maintaining common areas and enforcing standards. I paid my dues. That is what was required of me. You never volunteered for any committees or community events. Again, not required. And this has nothing to do with your client breaking into my shed and stealing my property. Judge Rowland sustained the prosecutor's objection that the questioning was irrelevant. In her closing argument, Brenda's attorney tried to paint her as a dedicated community servant who had made a mistake under extraordinary circumstances. The prosecutor was devastating in response. This was not a mistake. This was a planned crime. The defendant brought bolt cutters. She recruited 2 accomplices. She targeted a specific resident she had a grudge against. She stole valuable property. And then, when she was caught, she lied repeatedly and tried to use her position to retaliate against the victim. This is not community service. This is criminal behavior, and it deserves to be punished as such. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. At sentencing 6 weeks later, Brenda's attorney argued for probation and community service, emphasizing her lack of prior criminal record and her contributions to the community. The prosecutor asked for jail time, arguing that Brenda had shown no remorse and that her abuse of authority made her crimes more serious, not less. Judge Rowlands agreed with the prosecution. Miss Patterson, you held a position of trust in your community. Rather than serving your neighbors, you used that position to settle personal grudges and enrich yourself. The theft of Judge Harrison's firewood was not an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern of behavior that has caused real harm to many people. The court must send a message that this kind of abuse will not be tolerated. She sentenced Brenda to 2 years in prison, with 18 months suspended, meaning Brenda would serve 6 months. She also ordered restitution and 5 years of probation. Brenda looked stunned. I think she had genuinely believed she would walk away with a slap on the wrist. After the sentencing, reporters caught me outside the courthouse. I had avoided them throughout the process, but now I decided to make a brief statement. This case was never about me being a federal judge. It was about holding someone accountable for crimes they committed. Miss Patterson violated my property rights and then tried to use her position to avoid consequences. I am grateful that the justice system worked as it should, treating everyone equally under the law. That is all I have to say. The story faded from the news cycle after that. Brenda began serving her sentence at a minimum security facility in Vermont. Dale and Linda both completed their probation without incident. The Maple Ridge HOA implemented significant reforms, including term limits for board members, financial oversight procedures, and a clear appeals process for violations. As for me, life returned to normal. I went back to my work on the federal bench, hearing cases and writing opinions. The new HOA board was professional and respectful. They sent a newsletter thanking me for my role in exposing the corruption and helping reform the organization. I rebuilt my firewood supply over the summer, splitting and stacking logs while enjoying the peace of my mountain property. I even installed a better lock on the shed, though I doubted I would need it again. One afternoon in late fall, Tom Whitaker stopped by with a bottle of wine. "We wanted to thank you properly," he said. "A bunch of us are grateful for what you did. It took guts to stand up to Brenda. I just reported crimes that were committed against me. Maybe, but a lot of people would not have followed through. They would have been worried about the attention or the hassle. You stuck with it, and it made a difference." After he left, I sat on my porch and thought about what he had said. The truth was, I had been angry and had wanted justice. But I had also been in a position where I could fight back effectively. I knew the law, had resources, and understood the system. A lot of Brenda's other victims had not had those advantages. That bothered me. How many other HOA boards across the country were engaged in similar abuses? How many people were being harassed, fined, or having their property rights violated by petty tyrants who faced no real accountability? I could not fix all of that, but I could do something. I started working on an article for a legal journal about HOA governance and the need for stronger oversight and clearer legal standards. I also reached out to some legislators in Vermont to discuss potential reforms to state law. It was a small thing, but it felt important. Brenda Patterson had committed crimes during a blizzard, thinking her position protected her. She had been wrong, and she had paid the price. But the larger issue remained. Too many HOAs operated with too little transparency and too much unchecked authority. As winter approached again, and I prepared my firewood for another season, I thought about how differently things might have turned out. If I had not had video evidence, if I had not been willing to pursue charges, if I had not had the resources to fight back legally, Brenda might have gotten away with it. She would have continued her abuse, and other residents would have continued to suffer. Instead, she was held accountable, the HOA was reformed, and the community was better for it. On the anniversary of the blizzard, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a card signed by dozens of residents from Maple Ridge. "Thank you for standing up for what was right," it read. "You made our community better." I put the card on my mantle, next to a photo of my woodshed with its new lock. It was a reminder that justice mattered, even in small things, especially in small things. Because it was in those everyday situations, in neighborhood disputes and HOA meetings, where most people encountered the law. If the system did not work for them there, all the grand constitutional principles in the world meant nothing. Brenda Patterson had thought she was above the law. She had thought her position as HOA president gave her special authority. She had thought a federal judge would not bother fighting over firewood. She had been wrong on all counts. As I fed logs into my fireplace that evening, watching the flames dance and feeling the warmth spread through my home, I felt satisfied. Not vindictive or triumphant, just satisfied that things had turned out as they should. Crimes had been punished, reforms had been implemented, and a community had been freed from a tyrant. The firewood crackled and popped, and outside my window, snow began to fall again. But this time, my shed was full, my lock was secure, and my neighborhood was at peace. Justice, I thought, was a lot like firewood. It took effort to obtain, it needed to be properly stored and protected, and when you finally used it, it provided warmth and light for everyone around.